When you are an empathetic leader, you can have a huge positive impact on those that you motivate around you. However, how you choose to act on the information that you sense in your organization can really make or break you as a leader. In this week's episode of The Happy Leader, I'm going to talk to you about how to use your empathic ability to your advantage as a leader, some of the traps that you can fall into, and how to make sure you don't fall into those traps. Welcome to The Happy Leader. I'm Amy Sanchez, executive coach to some of the most innovative leaders and teams in Silicon Valley. I'll share stories and tips to help you navigate the most common leadership challenges so you can amplify what matters most: happiness. Empathy, the ability to understand and share the feelings of another, is a leadership skill that can give you a significant advantage as you seek to motivate those around you. When you can demonstrate that you see the people around you, which is what empathy allows you to do, those who experience this will feel understood and supported. In fact, evidence shows that leaders who demonstrate empathy get more out of their teams. But the flip side of this superpower, as always happens, there's always a flip side to a superpower. The flip side of empathy is that you can fall into the trap of taking on someone else's emotion. The minute you do this, you lose the edge that this superpower provides, and you start to deplete your own cup and your leadership effectiveness. In this week's episode of The Happy Leader, I'll highlight the best way to leverage empathy to amplify your leadership efforts, the traps to avoid to prevent you from unintentionally increasing the negative emotion, as well as how to preserve your own energy along the way. I'll also bring this to life with a story from a young CEO I coached here in Silicon Valley who struggled with this exact challenge. And finally, I'll give you tips to help you if you are empathetic at your core and sometimes can struggle with this in your leadership role. Let's start with how empathy can help your leadership efforts. A recent study of nearly 900 employees by Catalyst highlighted measurable impacts on team performance and the leader's ability to be empathetic. So check this out. Empathy actually increased innovation for this group. When people reported their leaders were empathetic, 61% of employees were more likely to report being innovative versus only 13% with less empathetic leaders. Empathy also improved engagement. 70% of people who experienced empathy from their leaders reported feeling engaged. Empathy also improves inclusivity. 50% of people with empathetic leaders reported their workplace was inclusive versus 17% with less empathetic leaders. And finally, empathy improves retention. 57% of white women and 62% of women of color said they were unlikely to think of leaving their companies when they felt their life circumstances were respected and valued by their companies. Those numbers dropped to 14 and 30% respectively when they didn't feel that level of support. Now, this is probably not a surprise to you that you hear that empathy actually increases all sorts of indicators that make our workplace more effective. The retention one is really interesting. Retention is one of those hidden costs that many companies don't track, but it significantly increases costs behind the scenes. Because think about this, with retention, you factor in training, recruiting, lost productivity, vacancy costs, separation costs, and the list goes on. So if you are an empathetic leader, you are bringing a whole new level of leadership impact to your organization. In short, leaders who demonstrate empathy will see a positive impact to top line and bottom line growth. This is why a lot of people are now hiring for empathetic leaders. If you're an empath, demonstrating empathy probably comes very easy to you. But as you know, this empathy can also have a dark side to it. To bring that to life, a story from an empathetic CEO that I coached from a rapidly growing biotech. Let's call her Sophia. Sophia was really skilled in her ability to pick up on the emotions of others, and she genuinely cared about the people who worked for her. She headed up a small pre-commercial team, one that she had handpicked, so there was a great deal of care and emotional investment in the team that she had built. In addition, she had the natural ability to read between the lines. She picked up on the unsaid and could read the vibe of the room. This intuitive gift was at times throwing her off her game. So here's the flip side of that. Sophia would give direction to a direct report to start a project that laddered up to one of her strategic objectives. If the direct report seemed distressed after she shared the task, she took that on as her own responsibility. When she sensed anything but alignment and motivation with the task at hand, her red flag went up. And this red flag meant, I have to fix it. In essence, this was a good thing because as CEO, she had a good pulse on the company culture and barriers to productivity for the group. That's great to know that as a CEO. However, how she addressed this red flag was problematic. She would take on negative emotional response as her responsibility. She saw it as her job to make people feel better, so they were motivated to do the work. Now, that was a really dangerous slippery slope because when she saw those red flags, she switched roles. She moved from giving strategic direction and being a strong leader, she moved into undertaking a role of saving. Here's what that sounded like. I can see you're distressed by this request. How about you try talking to Yoshi, ask how he tackled this in the past, and see if it gives you some good ideas to get started? Her direct report would reply, deeper into their stuck state. But Yoshi doesn't like to be interrupted. He doesn't respond well to me asking for help. Sophia would pause, think, and offer a new solution. What about looking back at our past experiments to see how people solved for this in the past? The ever problem solver. Another pushback would come in reply. But we've never done anything like this in the past. I don't even know where to start looking. This dialogue, although Sophia came into it with really good intentions, this actually helped to further convince her direct report that they were in fact stuck and there was no solution. Sophia would then respond, why don't I help you with the initial layout of the experiment, and then maybe that will help you get started. What do you think? This usually solved the issue for the moment, but as soon as the direct report left, Sophia's mode inevitably turned to a sour one. Heaviness sat in her chest, and she felt frustrated by the added work and inability for her team to problem solve independently. She was putting all this effort into saving when in fact it was that saving methodology that was hurting her and her team more. Here's what we revealed through coaching. Sophia had an unsaid belief that people's emotional response was her responsibility. This was learned at an early age. She took this with her into her CEO role and therefore felt like it was her job to save people around her. We explored the enormous weight of that belief. If everyone's emotional response was her responsibility, then she was taking on the responsibility for all their past experiences, interpretations, assumptions, and limiting beliefs. That became an impossible job. What happens when you take action with this belief that is so ingrained in you that you have to save people? I asked. Her reply was this. This approach actually made her direct reports anchor more to the belief that they couldn't move forward without her. This was a lose-lose. She needed to find a new way. I asked Sophia, what's a new belief that would be more empowering for you and your direct reports? She replied very quickly, I need to leave with the belief that their emotional response is the individual's responsibility. My responsibility is to outline the strategy and the goals with as much clarity as I can and find a different way to support them when they struggle without taking on their emotional response as my job to solve. With this new insight learned out of coaching, she decided to put this to the test. She tried this new approach, and when we next met 2 weeks later for our coaching call, she was bounding with excitement. Amy, I led with my new belief, and it was remarkable how much more energy I was able to preserve and the new way I saw my direct reports problem solve on their own. It's like they have a new sense of empowerment and ownership, and they aren't relying on me to solve every problem anymore. I have a noticeable amount of extra time now, and I can use that to focus on other things. This was a huge shift for me, both emotionally and physically. Sophia learned a really powerful insight about her tendency to try and jump in and save people, and how much more effective she and those around her became when she stopped playing the savior role. She now has a new playbook for how to use this empathy to her advantage without unnecessarily draining her energy or taking on more work. And her team is operating at a higher level. Sophia found the win-win. If you can relate to this need to save people when you see them falling into emotional distress, here are some tips to help you maintain a productive distance and find the win-win. Number 1, brainstorm times when your empathetic nature has helped you as a leader, and also times when it's hurt you. Look at all of the examples of times when being empathetic has compromised your leadership effectiveness. See if you can identify themes among these examples. Once you have a central theme, ask yourself what underlying beliefs or assumptions guide your response. Is there another way to look at these to help you find the win-win? Oftentimes, it can be really hard to look closely at these in isolation because when you're so close to it, it can be hard to be objective. This is a good time to ask a trusted friend or a mentor for help thinking through a new belief. Another great option is to hire an executive coach like me to create awareness around past responses that are no longer serving you and explore new beliefs that can improve your leadership effectiveness and preserve your energy. In short, having the gift of naturally being able to pick up on what isn't being said in the room can be a huge advantage as a leader. Not everyone has this gift. To ensure you're using it to your advantage, spend time creating awareness around how this superpower can help you and where it may be unintentionally hurting you so you can implement strategies to help you leverage this gift in your favor and continue to help set you up for success far into the future. I hope this gives you some ideas about how to increase your leadership effectiveness. And as always, stay happy out there. Thanks for listening to The Happy Leader. If you would like more information about me, Amy Sanchez, and our executive coaching and team leadership services at Swim Against the Current, visit swim-against.com. And if you liked this podcast, help others who could use the support find it by giving us a rating. Until next time, life is short. Stay happy.